cannot speak for me and have a check and balance on power. One person can make a mistake. And guess what? Tariffs are a terrible mistake. They don't work. They will lead to higher prices. They are a tax, and they have historically been bad for our economy. But even if this were something that was magic and was going to be a pot of gold.
Okay, now Rand Paul. Rand Paul. Well, that was Rand Paul. Rand Paul, and welcome back. You're listening to Lurie Daniel Favors on SiriusXM's Urban View, where talk empowers and becomes action. That was Rand Paul basically being one of the first Republicans out the gate talking about I don't want to live under a tyrant. I love Donald Trump as much as anybody else, but I don't want to live under a tyrant. Rand Paul, tell us how you really feel. There you heard him speaking on the floor of the Senate, talking about the fact that tariffs are a really bad idea. And about the fact that despite the fact that he appreciates Donald Trump, that he thinks that tariffs are terrible. And he doesn't want to live under a tyrant, even if that tyrant happens to be a Republican right now. So this is all getting very interesting. It's getting very, very interesting because the white racists aren't holding together the way they usually hold together. We got a lot to get into for today. I said a lot to get into for this. We have a lot to get into for today, including a song that I penned on the way in for Vivacious Vivek Ramaswamy. We're going to try to get to all of it in the time that we have. Hi, YouTube. Hi, Instagram. Hope y'all are doing well. Listen. The world is continuing to experience the fallout from what is taking place in this government. And the reality is the rest of the world is kind of like, y'all some children. Y'all some whole ass children over there in the United States of America. We got to handle you like children. But I just want to say this. I was sharing with the Urban View audience this morning that there was this video on Instagram that I saw where this white woman had gone to a protest and she was like, wait a minute, where are all the non-whites? Because the only people at the protest were the whites, because everybody else got the memo. The black people got the memo. The non-white presenting Latinos got the memo. The black Latinos got the memo. Let me just be clear about what I'm saying. And so we were clear about what was happening. And she was there at the protest, realizing in real time that there were also no police. There were also no riot gear. There were also no tanks. There were also no tear gas canisters being tossed at them. It was safe white people protesting safely, being kept safe, and there were no police. And it was like, yeah, because if we show up, then the police are coming out. Now, we show up peacefully. We protest peacefully. Do y'all remember the picture of the sister, the thin sister? I mean, she looked like she might have been 21, 22 years old. So she could have been a high school student, for God's sake. She was very thin in a dress, a spring dress. She had on ballet flat slippers, and she has her hands out like this because she's walking. The police are walking towards her. They're about to place her under arrest. There are 3 white officers in riot gear, addressing a girl in a sundress that she could have picked up at Forever 21 for $9.99 and a pair of ballet flat slippers. And they presume and they operate in this way that says we are going to be violent, even though we are not. We protest peacefully. And so I was so glad to see white people realizing and having that light bulb moment. But then it also occurred to me, y'all got rid of diversity, equity, and inclusion for this president. You fix it. You got the UAW president out there, the president of one of the biggest unions out there, who wrote an article or cited an article where he's talking about the fact that, tariffs are going to be fine. I mean, most Americans don't even have stocks. I don't even know why people are bugging up. Because remember, this is the same president that supported Donald Trump. And it's like, man, what a weird way for the unions to find out that your president does WEI math, white, entitled, and incompetent math, because most of the union members got pensions, and pensions are invested in what? The stock market. And when your stock market is crashing and your 401ks are crashing, and then you talking about most Americans don't have money in the stock market, but you represent hundreds of thousands of people who have money in the stock market. What a way for the unions to find out that your leadership is full of a bunch of WEIs. And I'm looking at what's happening in China. Today's Financial Times reporting that China keeps some powder dry in preparation for tariff trade-offs, meaning the Chinese, who now have implemented a reciprocal tariff on Americans, they got way more in their back pocket than we got pockets. Right? They got mainly because they make the jeans with the pockets, and Americans don't make any damn thing anymore, but they got way more to do move. And we're going to talk about that in a minute, because these phones, y'all better hold on to your phones. because China's like, well, we ain't finna do is send the Americans no more of these rare earth minerals. How about that? How about that? You need them minerals for them phones and them electronic vehicles and those electric batteries. Yeah. How about this? You can't make none of them things without the materials that we send. Oh, and by the way, did you know that we mine 60% of the rare earth minerals that you all need to use? And did you know that we process 90% of the rare earth minerals that you all need? Keep playing, Trump. That's the Chinese. That's what they plan. Or as the Chinese have said, you are both ignorant and impolite. That was a direct quote. That was a direct quote. But I want to talk about this because we are now in a situation where the schools now have 10 days to basically confirm, certify that they are no longer going to be employing diversity, equity, and inclusion measures, which directly impacts our children. So we're going to talk about a lot today. And where's Vivacious? I have a song for Vivacious, Vivek Ramaswamy. Amina, when we play the clips, let's play them in studio so that people on Instagram will hear them. I know YouTube will be able to, but Instagram, I want you all to be able to hear it too. So let's start in the beginning. Remember how Vivacious Vivek Ramaswamy told Americans they were stupid? And like they haven't dealt well with it. They didn't deal well with it ever since. And like it was not good. And he like had a whole like 10-paragraph essay, which was like 8 paragraphs longer than most Americans are going to read. And he talked about the fact that, you know, the American culture is the problem. And he talks about the fact that a culture that, and I said this yesterday, a culture that venerates Corey from Boy Meet World or Zach and Slater over Screech, even though Zach did do very well in the SATs, or Stefan over Steve Urkel will not produce the best engineers. And then he said, I know multiple sets of immigrant parents in the 90s who limited how much their kids could watch those shows because they promote mediocrity. And their kids went on to become wildly successful STEM graduates. Unsaid in his comment was that the people who were watching these shows went on to be Biff, went on to work for the people who are wildly successful STEM graduates. But Vivek Ramaswamy was correct. I miss Vivacious. I miss Vivacious because what Vivacious said was, he says, more movies like Whiplash, fewer reruns of Friends, more math tutoring, fewer sleepovers, more weekend science competitions, fewer Saturday morning cartoons, more books, less TV, more creating, less chilling, more extracurriculars, and the lots. They didn't appreciate that. And so as I was thinking about that this morning, as we're going to prepare for this segment on education that I'm about to get into, I was like, a song just was born into my spirit. And the song is called Vivacious. Vivacious. Y'all ready? I've never actually sung this out loud because I was humming it in my head. I told Amina, I was like, damn, I'm about to sing this song that I ain't actually practiced because it just came to me. So it might not work so well, but y'all know how I do with a good song in my spirit. We got multiple songs dedicated to Clarence Thomas, Ho and Ass. We might as well try one for Vivacious. Y'all ready? Vivacious, Vivacious Vivek Ramaswamy told the whites that their culture was whack. He said you care more about prom kings than reading, and perhaps you should try to do a bit more math. But the WEIs would rather be loud than correct. Centuries of ego make them easy to predict. So none of the blacks were surprised when Vivek got melanized, and they sent his intelligent brown ass to the back. Vivacious Vivek Ramaswamy presents a lesson for all the whites to learn. When you pick idiots to serve as your leaders, they'll destroy your country and watch as you burn. Vivacious Vivek Ramaswamy, if only they had taken your lead, the electorate would be smarter as a country, and the voters would have picked the black lady. Yes! Damn it! That's what would have happened. It's a stupid country that doesn't know a lot of things, and we're all stuck here trying to make it last. But the reason why this is important is because what's happening with education right now. And what's happening with education right now, outside of the tariffs, outside of all the terrible things that the tariff-ing president is trying to do, the schools, departments of education have been told that they have 10 days to certify that they are not going to be participating in diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now, I know a lot of people think, well, diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI was only benefiting white women. First of all, stop it. That tells me you don't know a lot about the activism that was taking place in your communities. It also tells me you don't do a lot of activism in your community, because all the after-school programs that were specifically targeted to our kids, the programs that were going to allow them to fill in the gaps in what our kids were experiencing, that was diversity, equity, and inclusion. I had somebody who is a non-voter in my workspace, not my law center, but in my workspace. And they were like, I don't even know why we need diversity, equity, inclusion. I was like, boy, the only reason you got a budget line is because of diversity, equity, inclusion. Don't you tutor disadvantaged kids? That's diversity, equity, and inclusion. And right now, we are getting notice that the Department of Education has issued issued a notice to the schools that basically said you've got 10 days to certify that you are no longer going to be participating in diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, or all your federal funding is going to get cut. We have a clip from Ms. Frazzled. Are we ready to play that clip? Instagram, y'all will be able to hear this out loud. YouTube, y'all should be able to hear this through the system. Let's listen to Ms. Frazzled.
Trump's education department gave every public K-12 school an order to sign a legally binding document saying they have fully eliminated discriminatory diversity, equity, and inclusion practices, or they risk losing all federal education funding. This isn't guidance like this was. It's officially a legal threat at this point. Remember, friends, who feels discriminated against by diversity, equity, and inclusion? Okay, yeah, you got it. That matters because its demand letter cites the Civil Rights Act law that bans discrimination based on race and twists it to claim that anti-racist policies are somehow racist against white people. This letter demands that every state Department of Education promises they are in compliance, and that every school district and school below them are in compliance as well. And not in compliance with Title VI as it has been interpreted by normal human beings actually concerned with real racism and discrimination, but with the Trump administration's interpretation of Title VI. So the chilling effect is going to be huge here, because the letter says any equity initiative, any single one, an advantage over another could lead to funding loss, lawsuits, or DOJ enforcement. But the regime is really hoping that self-censorship does half of their work. In other words, they want schools and state leaders to guess what might get them in trouble and cut things before they're told to. This is obeying in advance. This type of thing is what teaches authoritarianism what it can get away with. People say, well, they're going to ban this, so start canceling those programs before anybody even asks. We'll lose federal funding if we don't stop saying certain words or avoid certain books. Not because anyone said to explicitly, but because schools are afraid that they might. Historically, this has been how some other familiar regimes have done it.
Yeah, and those other familiar regimes would be like the Nazi regime. That's how they did it. And so what we have to be clear about is what she said there. And I really like Ms. Frazzled. Y'all maybe remember Miss Frazzled, but this is Ms. Frazzled. She's an educator, and she does these amazing videos that are super informative, and they help people. And she does it in that sing-songy voice, which I'm pretty sure is probably her actual voice, at least the voice that she uses when she's teaching in the classroom. So it's very effective, friends. Okay. And so what she's talking about there and what she says in that letter is that essentially you have to, as an education institution, you have to confirm that if you are receiving Title I funding, which is funding for poor children, okay, if you're receiving federal funds, and remember, federal funds don't replace programs, they fill in the gaps that the states were not able to meet. So when you have free breakfast programs because you live in a community or your school is in a community where poor children go to school and they don't have a guarantee for breakfast, and you know as an educator that if you're hungry you can't learn, then you want to make sure that there is funding for those kids to have breakfast. If you live in an economically disadvantaged community and you know that these kids don't have computers, they don't have laptops, they don't have tutoring programs, you want to fill in the gaps, and that's what the federal funds allow you to do. If you have children who are disabled and they need elevators to get up and down the school building, they need ramps so that their wheelchairs and their walkers can go up, then that's what this funding helps for. If you have students who speak multiple languages and you teach in English, so you need English language learning programs, then that's what this funding goes to. I told y'all know that before I went to the Center for Law and Social Justice, my husband and I and our colleagues have done a ton of professional development for educators, making sure that educators know how to use race and diversity in the classroom to produce academic success. That's not just a feel-good exercise, because it doesn't really feel good at all. It's very stressful. It's very challenging to walk into a school that you do not work in and explain to them how they're being racist, how they're disenfranchising and disadvantaging Black and brown children, and how they can use the diversity to actually be better. But what did she say there, friends? Who is it that feels intimidated by diversity, equity, and inclusion programs? Them. The whites. I'm not talking about the righteous watches. I'm talking about the racist watches, right? The ones who benefit from everything that's happening right now. So according to the letter, A violation of civil rights law includes the use of diversity, equity, and inclusion programs to advantage one's race over another. That is not what diversity, equity, and inclusion programs do. But remember that phrase that when you're used to privilege, anything that feels like equality really feels like oppression? That's what's happening here. Because diversity, equity, and inclusion programs in the school systems were necessary. Why? The same reason diversity, equity, and inclusion programs were necessary anywhere else: to disrupt, to hack, to break through white America's centuries-long agreement to essentially prevent anyone who was not white and had a penis from competing. That's what it was. According to the memo, school and state officials, which means even if your school is independently minded and your school is about that, we educating our kids in the way that they need kind of life, the state also has to sign off on a certification letter. And that letter has to say, we are not going to any longer engage in diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. I have colleagues who are doing this work in schools right now, teachers that already changed lesson plans. Teachers who have been working in schools for the past decade have been trying to create a more diverse and equitable, inclusive space. Oh, culturallyresponsiveteaching.com is the website you should use if you're trying to find out, get my husband's company to work for you. I just saw that in Instagram. It's culturallyresponsiveteaching.com. Go to that website. You can find how to reach him and bring him and the work that he does. I'm no longer there, but you can get him there. Anyway, there are schools right now that have been working and making phenomenal strides, exceeding and excelling in their ability to close the achievement gap, that are now being told they basically cannot use anymore those resources. I want to drop for you all, and I'm going to put this in, Jonah, the Zoom chat. If you could please tweet this out. And then Nubia, I'm going to drop it in there as well. And then YouTube, I'm going to drop it there as well. Instagram, y'all going to have to get this one on your own. I'm sorry, y'all. I appreciate it. I can't get it to everybody because it'll mess up my phone if I do. But what you Instagram should be looking up that I did not drop into the chat for you is an article. I'm sorry. It's a report. It's a report called Cultural Responsiveness, Racial Identity, and Academic Success, a review of literature. One more time. The title is Cultural Responsiveness, Racial Identity, and Academic Success, a review of the literature. The reason this is important is because this was an effort. This is a report produced by the Heinz Endowments, and they asked professors to essentially examine curriculum, instruction, and educational foundations and conduct a review of the literature on some concepts. Chief among them were culturally responsive pedagogy, positive ethnic socialization, resilience, and academic success, with some emphasis on arts programming. And they looked at more than 2,800 sources, and they looked at, and they cite all the sources in the book, in the report, you can see it there, and they essentially look at this long history of schooling ALANA children. ALANA is an acronym that stands for African American, Latino, Asian, and Native American students, basically all the non-white students. And the reason they study the ALANA non-white students is because white students have a culturally responsive education. They get one every single day. They get an education that tells them you did everything, you created everything, you sponsored everything, you did all the things, even though that half of that shit ain't true. But they get an education that empowers them to go on and take on the world. Not academically, because as vivacious Vivek Ramaswamy reminded us, their education is stupid, but it puts them at the top in this particular country. According to the report, it was once assumed that ALANA students, African American, Latino, Asian, and Native American, it was once assumed that ALANA students, once they assimilated into white society, academic success would follow. Pause. No diddy. I did a whole ass podcast episode on this. And so if you're not listening to Lurie Breaks It Down, which is a podcast where I explain these concepts in way more detail, then you're missing out. But I explained this whole concept there. I'm going to give it to y'all in shorthand. It was assumed that once these non-white students assimilated into white society, academic success would follow. The challenge with that is Black students were already very academically successful in all Black schools. In fact, they were doing better in all Black schools. We did not have an academic achievement gap until white women started teaching our children according to the curriculums that were designed for white children. Okay, that's when we start to see an achievement gap. Black children were already exploring and exploding in genius, but they could not get access because white Americans, again, were participating in a multi-centuries long effort to exclude Black children, Black people, Black mamas, Black daddies, Black everybody from anything that was only reserved for the whites. More recently, according to the report, the research literature has come to regard this logic as subtractive, meaning the idea that you would have non-white students enter into an education system and expect them to excel and exceed in a curriculum that is only designed for white children is subtractive. It is foolish. It makes no sense. And here's how we know why. I want you to imagine, this is an exercise I give to a lot of people whenever I'm doing any of these workshops. I want you to imagine that you are a group of white parents who have moved to a new city, a new state, It's new for you there. You've never been there before. And you decide it's a lovely community. And so you meet up with all the other white parents who just got there. For some reason, y'all all just moved there recently. And as you're there, you decide, well, hey, we're in this new community. It's time for us to enroll our children in school. And so you go down to the local schoolhouse and, oh, my, clutching my alabaster pearls. What is the name of that school? Is it the El Haji? The El Haji Maliki? What is this school? Because in this scenario, you're going to the El Haj Malik El Shabazz School, which is actually it's a real school in Brooklyn, New York, Bedford-Stuyvesant. Shout out to Bed-Stuy. And you're going to this school, and you and your white counterparts, all of you who are new gentrifiers, you get to the school building and you realize, oh my Lord, I'm clutching my alabaster pearls because the name of the school I cannot pronounce. I don't even know if they teach English in there. But then you're greeted by this beautiful woman who is an educator, clearly connected to the school, and she comes out and she welcomes you in. And you're like, well, she seems nice, but I don't understand the name of this school. But then you realize, even though she seems nice, she's Black. And her name is Keisha Jenkins. And then you find out that Keisha Jenkins is the school principal. And you're like, well, clutching even more of my alabaster pearls because the name is something Blackish sounding and the principal is Black. Well, now, hold on there, Tom. We can't assume that it's going to be an all Black school just teaching for the all Blacks. And so you and these white parents, you're walking into the school building, and then you begin to realize that you see red, black, and green flags on the walls. And you see every classroom has a name, and it's named after somebody that you don't know. Who are these people? Frederick Douglass? Who is that? This classroom's named after Rosa Parks. I feel like I know a Rosa, but something about a bus. And then that room is named after Marcus Garvey. And there's all this. You can be proud. You can do it. But there's only pictures of Black people on the walls and in the posters. And imagine you are this group of white parents, and you're thinking about enrolling your precious little Timmy and little Tabitha into the school. But you realize the teachers are all Black. The name of the school sounds Black. And the books that they're reading from, you look at the library and you realize the authors got names like E.B. Zaboy and Jason Reynolds and Ibram X. Kendi, and they look Black. And you realize everybody in the building seems Black, and there's no white people. Chances are, white Americans, if you're being perfectly honest, and if you're being in line with your history, you're walking out of that school there. You're not enrolling your children in that school because you would not be able to see how your white child, unless you're a member of the Righteous Watchers and had taken a whole lot of anti-racism courses, you're walking out of that school because there is no way for you to imagine how your white child could get their educational needs met in a school that seems physically and instructionally set up for for Black children. And when I've given this example before, and I talked about this in the podcast, I've given this example before in a classroom full of teachers, and one of the teachers in the classrooms responds with like, dude, I mean, my response would be like, it's kind of subtle, it's kind of hard to imagine that actually happening, but like, it seems like that would be kind of a challenge. Yeah, it would be a challenge. And we know that white parents would not enroll their children into white schools because when white parents tend to move to Black neighborhoods, y'all don't enroll your kids in our schools unless you're taking them over. I know it because I live in Bedford-Stuyvesant. I see it every day. And I know the research says that even when you move into diverse spaces, you send your kids to private school or you manipulate the system and you get your kids into schools that look more like them. Yet we expect Black children, Latino children, Asian and Native American children to be able to sit in spaces where schools and curriculums were set up to meet the specific educational needs of white children. And let us be clear, the educational and learning needs of the children who descended from the white slave-owning class are not the same as the educational learning needs of the children who descended from the Black enslaved class. Let's be clear about that. And I know some of you are thinking, well, girl, Asians do fine. Let's pause there. First of all, you're thinking, when you say Asians do fine, you're thinking Chinese, you thinking Japanese, you ain't thinking Vietnamese, you ain't thinking Laotian, you ain't thinking Hmong, because when you're thinking about them other communities that don't have the China behind them, that don't have Japan behind them, you're talking about children who are making up the vast majority of the poor Asians, the non-smart Asians. Okay, so let's not be stereotypical and so myopic in our view that we do not have nuance in our analysis. So what we're doing right now is the schools are being forced to say we're not going to have any diversity, equity, inclusion, when the research from this report and many other reports, this is just one that condensed it, but according to the report, how much time I got? Okay, we good. According to the report, research now regards culture. Research now regards culture as a set of tools, perspectives, and capabilities that students can deploy in the pursuit of learning. When these tools, perspectives, and capabilities are suppressed or denied, students are educationally disempowered. They find it hard to use their culture to learn. The reason this is important is because culture is not just about the way that you talk. It's not just about the food that you eat. It is an intergenerational way of viewing and understanding and interacting with the world. It is an analytical tool. You bring your culture into the classroom if you're white, and you're able to use your culture as a part of your analytical framework. And what do we want children to do when they are in school? Use their analytical capabilities to make sense of what is happening, what they are learning. Culture is a learning tool. And when Black children are in learning spaces where their culture is centered, they learn better, they perform better. And you ain't got to trust me. Look at the freaking reports. It just so happens I read them because I'm smart. And that's not a flex. That's just what basic intelligent people, I mean, it is a flex. I mean, I am smart, but that's not a braggadocious point. It's a point of distinction because in this country, we do not allow intelligence to be something that is prioritized because as vivacious Vivek Ramaswamy tried to tell us, American culture prioritizes stupidity. The report goes on. A student receives from his or her culture a racial identity. And for Alana children and youth, their racial identity can connect them to a wider project of racial uplift. Malcolm X was brilliant, and they told him, be a carpenter, you can't be a lawyer. Frederick Douglass was brilliant and had to trade food with poor white children who didn't have slaves because they were really poor, had to trade food with them so they would teach him how to read because his white female master slave owner stopped teaching him how to read once her husband, the male slave owner, told her, you're not allowed to teach slaves how to read because as soon as you teach an enslaved African how to read, they're no longer going to be a good slave. Think about that. Think about that. When Harriet Jacobs is writing letters, she's not writing to get an A. She's writing because it was a connection to freedom. When Frederick Douglass is learning how to read, he's not learning how to read for a grade. He's learning because it was going to tie him to freedom. When Malcolm X is learning how not just to read the basics, but learning how to understand, and he's incarcerated at this point. He's in prison. And Bimby, the character who we come to know in his book or in the autobiography of Malcolm X, that character, he wasn't a teacher giving him a grade. Malcolm X was driven to learn because it was tied to his freedom. When Black children are in educational spaces that are tied and rooted in their culture. And the same is true for everybody else. We know it's true. And we know white people know it because that's what you give to your kids. We know you know it because that's why you wouldn't enroll your kids in the El Haj Malik El Shabazz school. When Black children have an education that is rooted not just in getting a grade, but in tying to meeting the needs of the community, they perform beautifully. And don't tell me I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about because I do this work. I do this work. I got decades of this shit behind me. I got research in front of me, and we have an opportunity right now to say no. The report goes on. Hold on, I lost my place. I was getting a little too excited. This project, this racial uplift, is reminiscent of countless anecdotes of schooling prior to Brown versus Board of Education, where students' learning was connected to an educational mission, as in, I must learn so my community can benefit. Studies of segregated education have shown that when these institutions were a part of a project of racial uplift, strong, positive racial identities led to high achievement. Researchers have built on the research that uncovered the flaw in assimilation logic. That logic that said, we'll just bring your Black self into our white schools and you'll just learn a white culture and you'll learn a white curriculum that was created for white children and you'll be fine. No, they're not fine. That's where the achievement gap comes from. They say researchers have built on the research that uncovered the flaw in assimilation logic and have now generated a substantial body of research that demonstrates Alana students learn best. Alana students learn best in culturally familiar settings and when they have positive racial identity. I'm sorry, when they have strong positive racial identities. Do you understand what we're talking about here? Do you understand how that impacts what's going on in our schools right now and the fact that white leadership in this country have decided that they are so concerned about the fact that white children might have to learn something that upsets them about their racial history, the actual truth, that if we are choosing to ensure that Black children have an education that meets their needs, it is discriminatory to white children. Do you see that? Do you see that? There is a study put out by Harvard. Oh my God. And I'm sorry, I cannot find it. Academic success. I'm looking for it. I talked about it before. It was a study out of Harvard and Pittsburgh. It's called How Racial Identity Shapes Academic and Personal Success. And racial identity shaping academic and personal success is not like some random thing. There is a science to this. And all of you who have worked with Black children who are considered the worst in their schools, but you put them in an African-centered program and they learn how to read, they learn how to write, they will write for hours, they will engage, they will promote education, they will be excited to learn. That's what the Harvard-Pittsburgh study was finding. They found that not only when you provide, particularly for Black children, when you give Black children a strong racial identity, when you connect a strong racial identity to their academic success, they are going to go to school, their attendance rates increase. Their applications to college rates increase. Their grades increase. Their educational experience is not just one that says get a grade so you can go perform and learn how to speak in white voice and learn how to interview well and learn how to get a good job working for white people, making white money so you can afford to move out of your Black ass neighborhood, because that's a sign of success, and you can move into a white neighborhood where your white neighbors don't even fucking want you there. They don't even want you there. And we still try to make that a sign of success. The Harvard-Pittsburgh study tells us, and this is the study, How Racial Identity Shapes Academic and Personal Success. That study tells us that when you provide Black children and other children of color, but I'm talking Black, when you provide Black children with a culturally responsive education, when you provide them everything that the Department of Education just told these schools to stop doing, they are going to learn. They are going to excel. And miss me if you think the Department of Education don't know this. They want your Black kids stupider than their white ones. They want our children to not have access to a type of education that the research has shown benefits them. And so when your schools get this letter, when your states get these letters, and I'm sorry for those of y'all who live in Republican-led states, I'm sorry. I don't know what to tell you. You better organize and organize and organize again. You're going to organize and organize and organize again. We need a song for that, because y'all going to have a whole lot more to deal with than some of the schools in states like New York. Although New York, I'm giving you a side eye as well, because in New York City, we have the most diverse school district in the country. And we have the most stratified academic outcomes, because what New York has been doing under current leadership notwithstanding, what New York City has been ensuring that children have access to a culturally responsive education, that they're going to have access to teachers who are trained in how to engage in culture and bring culture into the classroom, so that diversity is an asset, and stop thinking about Black kids from a deficit model and thinking about what they bring into the classroom from an asset model. This is what this new effort from the Department of Education is all about. They want our children stupid. At least as stupid as theirs. They certainly don't want to have homegrown Blacks and melanated beating them at their own game. So we're in a moment right now where the Department of Education, this is line in the sand time. Black parents who have not been as active in your kids' schools might want to get on that. Might want to sign up for some of these PTA meetings. Might want to have the PTA calendar synced up with your own so that you can make it, so that you can be there, show your face. Might want to make sure that you are joining groups like Stop Moms for Liberty, who are trying to take over the schools all over the place. Might want to do it. Vivacious Vivek Ramaswamy tried to tell you. So right now, we are in a situation where lines are drawn in the sand. And while the tariffs are tariffing and the economy is crashing and all these things are happening, what are you going to do about it? Says Joe Madison. What are we going to do about it? 866-801-8255. 866-801-TALK is the number. Instagram, thank you so much. Love y'all. Appreciate y'all. Bye-bye. YouTube, I appreciate y'all. Hold on. Let me say actually goodbye to Instagram. All right. Sometimes I be saying bye-bye and I don't really bye-bye. YouTube, appreciate y'all. Hang on just a second. Urban View. We got some stuff to figure out. Because the reality is we're in a moment right now where whether we resting or whether we're actively doing the work underground and not telling people what's happening because we're keeping that off the socials, which I'm doing, and I hope you all are as well, we got to figure out what comes next. And we got to figure out if they snatch this funding from our schools, because what y'all need to do is be calling your senators. You need to be calling your elected officials and tell them, hell no, we won't go. What you ain't going to do is this. You need to be getting on your 5 calls out. You need to call your state and local officials. Damn, I should have showed this to Instagram too. Sorry, Instagram. Y'all gonna have to get it later. You're going to have to tell your state and local officials, absolutely the fuck not. The fuck not. We're not doing this. And you're going to have to do it intentionally. You're going to have to do it insistently. You're going to have to mount up. We're going to have to mount up. And it's important that we do so collectively. Find out where your elected officials stand on this issue. Tell them what you're not going to do is sabotage our children and send them back to an era where we no longer have access to the resources. Now, you can leave the schools alone. Just leave us alone. Because what really, a lot of us send our kids to schools that are all Black anyway. Y'all better be taking over them schools, because I know one thing that happens when the Christians who only believe in creationism get it in their mind that they find out that you're gonna teach their white children something other than the Lord created the entire universe and the planets and everything they're in 7 days. You know what they do? They organize, they go down to the school board, and what's going to happen is not that, because they won't stand for it. What will you not stand for? What will you not stand for when it comes for your children? What are you going to say absolutely not to? These are the questions we have to ask ourselves. This is how we're going to have to show up, because we're given some real opportunities right now. They are making it so clear. And I want to say thank you to the white nationalists out there. I appreciate how clear you are on these issues, because your clarity allows me to communicate with my community in some ways that make it very clear that there is no line in the sand. I'm not being some hyperbolic extra Black. I'm just telling you the news. And damn, we didn't even get to the news cycle that I really wanted to cover, where China is basically like, F you and the rickety Ford American, let me not say Ford, I like Ford, I got stock in Ford, but F you and the American made car that you drove in on, because what you ain't gonna do is go far without us. We are gonna go to commercial break. 866-801-8255, 866-801-TALK is the number. Looking forward to taking your calls. Much more to come on the Lurie Daniel Favors Show. We'll be right back after this. Bye, YouTube.